Hey guys, Wes here again with another build guide overview, and this is, let me level up my skill gems there. This is an Oros Flicker Strike build, and for those of you that don't know, Oros is this big ass fiery unique sword here, and Flicker Strike is an ability that looks, well, let's just hit the Blood Aqueducts for a second. I'm going to make a clear speed video as well, so you guys can have that. But, you know, Flicker Strike is a skill that takes you places. And this build guide and this build guide overview is for a very particular kind of player. It is for a player who wants nothing more than to put their forehead down on their RMB and go places, because that seems to me to be what most players expect from a Flicker Strike build, and also what is the most fun way to play Flicker Strike. So I've built this character with that in mind. It pretty much runs itself, and it has some problems that I'm actually about to address, because I feel like real talk, these build guide overviews are mostly to kind of break down what is the real situation with the character. So first of all, it's fairly budget right now. I crafted this helmet myself. If you want to buy like a 40% increased Flicker Strike damage enchant helm and just throw some scorched fossils at it, you can get this. Nearby enemies have -9 fire resistance, which is a great mod for something like this. And then you just want to craft some life onto it. You want it to have some armor. This probably cost me, I don't know, 15C worth of mats. And that's just counting the fossil, the resonator, and the original, the purchase of the helmet was like nothing. It was, I don't know, it was like 5C or something. Apparently not that popular. So anyway, the only real expensive piece in the entire build is this Impresence, which I'm using so that I can use Blood Magic, which the build does use, to get the nodes behind Blood Magic so that I can get some really nifty life percentage on the tree. I've got something like 180%, which is pretty okay. I don't have the best gear, which is why my life is not the best. Got only 45 on my chest. This chest dropped. It dropped as a white 5-link in Blood Aqueducts, and I just threw an Essence of Greed at it to get some life, and it rolled okay other stats, so I threw a second res on it, and I've been using it ever since. I guess the important things to mention are that the build can do pretty much all red map content. It can't do certain bosses, though, and the sort of player who is going to want to play something like this, you're going to want to just hold down RMB and fight everything, right? Like, you just want to go fast, which is cool, and you can do almost all the content in the game. You can run it with prophecies up. Speaking of which, I have had my first experience. What is the prophecy hotkey? I thought it was H. Anyway, I had my first experience blocking prophecies, which is pretty cool. I've only got these 3 unlocked right now, and I just fill these 3 up and go. You can do red maps with all the sextants. You can do it with all the you can do it with prophecies up. You can do with you can almost yellow alch and go. You only got a couple of dead mods. Alright, anyway, so build solid. Certain bosses are just not tenable, and I'm about to make a clear video where I do a guardian, so we'll find out. I haven't done a guardian yet, so we'll find out exactly how many portals I have to waste on a guardian. It's probably not going to be pretty, but for the purposes of people that want to play Flicker Strike, I feel as though this is a really strong variant of like a really strong take on that skill, because it goes fast, it does great damage. You can do most bosses. Bosses that you can't do are stuff with like heavy phase shifting, because Flicker just doesn't do well with downtime or mechanics that require you to really precisely dodge, because you're flickering most of the time. You're not gonna be able to have that kind of precision, because while you're flickering, you just can't be doing other things. So boss is going to do a big old wind up, and your character is going to finish out its multi-strike flicker, and then you're going to die because you didn't have the time to back out. Anyway, I'm going to get into the actual what this build is. So I've decided to run it champion. Oros does an absolute crap ton of flat fire. It also gives you a frenzy charge when you ignite, and you can ignite an enemy however many times. It's not limited to like one of the things that I initially thought back when I was a newer player was like, well, what, like, can you ignite an already ignited enemy was the question in my head, and yes, you can. So getting your ignite chance way up high with stuff like flammability and the holy fire wheel up here is going to do you wonders for sustaining frenzy charges against bosses, which, if you didn't know, and I'll go over it now, Flicker Strike spends a frenzy charge to bypass its internal cooldown, which it has by default an internal cooldown of a couple of seconds, and you spend a frenzy charge to bypass that, so you can just flicker endlessly as long as you've got frenzy charges. And the reason that people run this with Oros is so that you can get that frenzy charge on Ignite, and then you just build Ignite. So the problem that people have a lot of the time with this is that they've got to go RT, so they can't go Elemental Overload, right? Which is a problem. So instead of running into that problem where you get you don't get the Ele Overload for damage scaling, what I've done is I've gone Champion. And Champion has this branch here, Conqueror and Worthy Foe. Conqueror makes sure that you taunt. You taunt 100% of the time on hit, and then once you've taunted things, they can't evade your attacks, which means that you hit them 100% of the time. Now, you can miss your first attack, but in practice, that doesn't matter. You don't even notice. What it does mean is that there is a map mod that is slightly more dangerous for you, and that is monsters cannot be taunted. Actually, is not a dead mod. Sometimes you won't even notice, but other times on, extra life maps with cannot be taunted, you'll notice that the monsters feel just a bit tankier. And so that's something to watch out for, because if it comes bundled with a bunch of other nasty mods, it might be something to look at. We have Permanent Fortify and Unstoppable Hero, which gives us a bunch of EVA and armor, and make sure that we can't be stunned. I was running Calm's Roots on this build because it mostly uses Leap Slam for movement, so as you can see, it doesn't really move very quickly, right? But anyway, I was using Calm's Roots up until I got this, because now I can't be stunned, obviously, ever, because I have Fortify all the time. So no Calm's Roots. I subbed it out for a 210 boots. I'm sure you guys will be digging through the build guide, so you want me to go over stuff that might not necessarily be intuitive or be in there. So let's hit that, like reasoning stuff. There's a variant of this build that's a little tankier, but I don't think it does any better, where I was trying to do something clever with this Scorching Ray totem here, but it doesn't seem to survive against bosses. So what you can do is you can take most of what's in here, which is the Flammability, Blasphemy, and your Leap Slam ability, and you can distribute that between your other links, and you can get a Calm's Heart if you want to be super, super tanky. I wanted to keep the build budget. I didn't want to do that, so you could do that. You could get a Calm's Heart, and you'll still have, provided you ditch this Scorching Ray setup, you'll still probably have enough links to swing everything else in the setup. And what you do at that point is you 6-link your Aura Sacrifice. This is on a 5-link, by the way. It's destroying red map bosses on a 5-link. It does really, really good damage when Val Ancestral Warchief is up to bosses, but just due to the nature of how Flicker Strike moves you, it has trouble with bosses. So anyway, Champion, right? We come out of the Duelist start. You want to pick up the two-hander wheel, and the typical thing that I see people do is come down here and pick up Wrecking Ball, because if you just throw a Fireborn in here, you get all of this physical two-hander, and physical two-hander damage becomes fire as well. It counts for your fire damage. So what you want to do is path down through here, gets you to the outside of the tree, which is usually pretty pretty efficient pathing to, if you're going to go all the way from one side of the tree to the other, the outside nodes are usually fairly efficient. Coming up through the left side of the tree, you have a lot of life. A couple of important wheels to get our Lava Lash. I wanted to get Battle Cry because I wanted to use endurance charges. I wanted to use endurance charges just to buff up my my Ellie and my Fizz resist, and to make my Immortal Call last longer. The alternative to that is running something like a cast when damage taken Warlord's Mark, but I really wanted to run Flammability because I think for mapping, Flammability's damage and the Ignite are very good on a build like this. So anyway, I took the instant War Cries so that I can do the forehead to the right mouse button kind of play style and just mash all of my abilities, because all of my self-cast abilities here, Blood Rage, Molten Shell, and Enduring Cry, can just be spammed. I can just spam them while I'm flickering, because all of them are now instant. The only other abilities I have in my bar are Scorching Ray, Vol Ancestral Warchief, and Leap Slam. Leap Slam is obviously just a movement skill, and the Scorching Ray and the Vol Ancestral Warchief are for bosses. So as long as you're going with this build, you're just mashing all your flasks and all of your active skills, and you're just going. And it feels great. It's got great clear speed. I picked up attack speed, Jules. Just attack speed, because attack speed makes Flicker feel so much better. Like, these are something like 15-16% attack speed, maybe even 18% attack speed per jewel, and they make the quality of life of the skill so much better. So that's what I would recommend for these jewel choices. Some Oros Flicker Striker builds, and I don't know how they run, because this seems to keep up frenzies on bosses, which was, I think, the important distinction for me here. But some of the builds run less chance to ignite. Like, I've got Combustion in my main link setup, and that would be the one that I would ditch if I had to run this 4-link. Because you're igniting enough, I think, to keep up frenzies in almost all cases on bosses, or not on bosses, while mapping, without the Combustion and without the Holy Fire Wheel. You really don't need much in the way of frenzy charge generation to keep up frenzy charges on packs with Oro. The reason I'm running the Holy Fire Wheel and the Combustion Gem, I mean, Combustion's nice for the fire damage, but the main reason I'm running it is to keep up frenzy charges on bosses, so that I don't have to do anything but frenzy. Flicker Strike to fight bosses. That's just the way that the build runs. So, you know, as far as this pathing goes, it's pretty unusual pathing. Most people wouldn't think to do this, but because I'm convinced that Blood Magic is kind of the way to run this build, allows you to be tanky while crawling all the way from the Duelist start to up to Ellie Overload. Just allows you to get the extra life down here to compensate for not really having enough points by 90-95 to get all the way to the Scion Life Wheel and fill it out. So anyway, you come down around here, pick up every bit of life, make sure to get the War Cries, come up the left side of the tree, picking up just efficient life, Jewel Socket. I picked up an extra endurance charge. I get the life regen as well. I'm not Vol packed, so that's great. Snake in here for the weapon elemental damage, get the life. Come up around here, get the life, get the extra ignite, get a Jewel Socket, and finally snake our way down to Elemental Overload, which is a 40% more damage multiplier, which is probably one of the biggest contributors to the fact that I can actually do damage on a 5-link. Really significant damage. I think Path of Building has me at almost 400k Shaper DPS. I think it might be more like 300k. I'm trying to remember. I've been doing a lot of builds lately. Anyway, flask-wise, this is not the most efficient thing. It's the thing I'm going to shove into the build, but you can do better. I think you can fit a Reflexes in here instead of a Staunching. If you can do something like buy a corrupted, you cannot be inflicted with corrupted blood Fireborn Jewel, but right now they're like 2 exalts, and I'm not putting together builds that require that high of a budget. My general rule of thumb for builds is if they can fund themselves within a few days without a whole lot of trouble, for most players, then that's the kind of budget that I want to work with. The only thing that's worth mentioning on here is the Impresence, like I said earlier. So that's the tree, the explanation for the Ascendancy. The gear choices are all very, very straightforward. You want life, resistance. You probably need to find dexterity in a couple of places. I've got it on my boots in both rings. And that's because, just due to the pathing, you end up pretty shy on dexterity, and with your main skill being Flicker Strike, running a Blood Rage, you're going to need dexterity requirements. I had this agility node spec'd at one point, which compensates for a lot of that, and it's a very easy thing to do. If it's going to cost you a lot to get a decent ring with dex on it, you can always just spec that temporarily. You can also spec Sanctity and then come up through and get Precision. At one point I had that spec'd as well before I got dex on my gear. No big deal there, really. Alright. There are other things that I want to mention before I close out the overview video, which I hope is helpful. I hope it's not just because I'm not doing out bullet points or whatever. You guys are gonna have to forgive me. I'm new at this. The black bar on the video will hopefully be resolved at some point. My resolution is just what it is, so I've got to work with that. I'm doing what I can here. Anyway, the things that I wanted to hit were delving. You can delve on this character. I'm actually gonna jump into like a monster level 78 delve or something like that to show you guys exactly how this feels. We'll just do a 79. You can die quite easily in delves with this character, but you can do delves. It's just you don't want to play it the way that most people want to play Flicker. Like, usually you just want to press like once or twice. You don't want to just hold down right mouse button, because if you do that, you will die. You will get flung off into the darkness. It'll take mobs like over there, and you'll just acquire them through Flicker Strike as a target, and you'll end up in the darkness flickering on mobs that are very threatening, because down here in the near the monster level 80, the stuff down here becomes more threatening than like the equivalent level mobs and maps, typically speaking, at least in my experience. And so what'll happen is they will just one-shot you. If there's like 12 invulnerable mobs and you're flickering on them in the darkness, they'll just club you to death. It's really, really stupid. The other thing that I wanted to talk about was leveling. Because I'm going to have a section. I've got a how it works section now in my build guides, and I've also got a leveling section. So I'll mention this, of course, in the leveling section. Also, make sure you grab flares if you're delving, by the way, because if you do end up out there in the darkness, what you can do is you can just hit your flare button, whatever you set that to, drop a flare, and you'll be able to kill things again. And in that way, you can save yourself quite a few unnecessary deaths. But anyway, leveling. I suggest leveling Molten Strike. I don't know, it's fiery, it's an attack skill. People use it with Oros, surprisingly enough. Okay, see, this is what I'm talking about. Delves can be very interesting. So anyway, I leveled Molten Strike. Always remember, do like a Tabula Rasa, do like a Gold Rim. Figure out like murderous eye jewels with no level requirement, darkness and throne stuff. Get a Kari ward so you're running faster. But generally speaking, Molten Strike is a very, very easy leveling experience. It was similar enough. It resembled the endgame. It resembled the endgame build to me enough that I went with it. It's fiery attack skill. I just went with a Brightbeak and I scaled flat damage. So you're talking like cold added lightning, ancestral call. Cold added lightning, ancestral call, probably multi-strike maybe, or faster attacks, or I'm trying to remember what else you would do. Probably just LMP or GMP at that point, just for more of the projectile balls from Molten Strike. And if you do that, you've got a Brightbeak, you've got flat damage. You just mow down everything throughout the entire storyline. It's not really a big deal. remember to pick up the wild, if you do decide to level Molten Strike, because you could level anything, obviously. You know, I like to level in a way that resembles the character that I'm going to end up with at the end of the game, but you guys can level however you want as long as you know what you're doing. I just want to make sure you have at least one option if you're going to level this character. So, you know, if you are going to level Molten Strike, remember to pick up the Wildfire Jewels. They are just the threshold jewel for Molten Strike, and you're going to have access to at least 2 jewel sockets pretty early on. You can pick this one up temporarily and unspec it. You'll get enough regrets just by leveling your character to do that. You can also pick up this Dexterity if you need it earlier on, by the way. No problems with that. This is going to be a Fireborn eventually, so, you know, you either get a Fireborn early and throw that in there, or you just do like a Wildfire. You could technically level dual wielding and spec through the Dervish wheel here instead of the Destroyer wheel. You could temporarily pick up like Blade Barrier or Ambidexterity if you're doing that, and just pad through there temporarily and respec all that later. Easy stuff. It was a super easy, super fast leveling experience, and I'm super happy with the build, actually. I think that Oros fans and Flicker Strike fans will probably enjoy playing something like this, so check out the more involved descriptions that I'm going to include in the build guide where you probably found this video. So read through that, and I hope you guys enjoy the build. And I hope you guys enjoy. I'm probably gonna get very crushed by a Guardian here going in, but I am gonna try to do a clear speed video with a Guardian, so enjoy that too. Happy delving, and I will talk to you guys all again next time.